Alright, so we are going to be looking at Dhcp, and we are going to first of all talk about the first part. Now Dhcp, it stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Dhcp stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. Dhcp has what we call the server, the client, and sorry about that. Dhcp has what we call a server side and also has what we call the client side. Now for the Dhcp server, this assigns IP information to all Dhcp clients dynamically. Now when we talk about IP assignment, IP information assignment to the Dhcp client, this type of IP information, we can have it in different categories. One, we have the IP address information. So the Dhcp server, it will assign the IP address to all the Dhcp clients. The second type of information that Dhcp will assign to the client is the subnet mask. The third one is the default gateway. We shall see that later on when we go to part 2 of configuring the Dhcp server. We have also the DNS. At times we call that the domain name server address. Now basically this one you get it from the ISP. It is the ISP, internet service provider, to give you this address. So when we talk about the IP information, what we mean by that, we are looking at the IP address, the subnet mask, the default gateway, and the DNS server address. So when it comes to configuring a Dhcp server, we have two options. One can decide to use a router, another one can decide to use a workstation. Now the choice depends on you, but for the case of today's lecture, I'll be talking about more on the side of the router, how we can make a router work as a Dhcp server. So don't forget, a router can work as a Dhcp server and also a workstation, or these personal computers we always use. Steps for configuring a router as a Dhcp. Here we are going to be looking at 5 steps, and if you master these 5 steps, I want to assure you, you'll be in position to configure any router to work as a Dhcp server. This is a common thing that you always find in the field as a network engineer, as a network assistant, as a system admin. At one point you'll be required to configure one of the routers of a company to work as a Dhcp server. So step 1, when you are setting up your Dhcp server, step 1, you exclude or reserve some IP addresses for the server. Now don't forget, the Dhcp server is going to be giving out addresses to clients. So there are some addresses which we need to reserve. Those addresses, we can reserve them for the servers such that no client uses them. So the command we shall be using to do that, to reserve some addresses, we shall use this command IP Dhcp excluded, meaning these addresses we are going to exclude, the clients will not pick them. So here we are reserving from 192.168.1.1 all the way to 192.168.1.5. So we have reserved 5 addresses, .1 up to .5. That is the first step. Step 2, you create the pool name. This pool name is kind of, we are going to create a container or a stack where we are going to put all the IP information, whereby if there is any client that needs it, it will always look for that pool, that container containing the IP information, then it will pick from that. So the second step, you create the pool, the container, and you give it a name. So to do that, we shall use a command IP dhcp pool. Then you put your name of your choice. So for me, I'm going to be using R2 client LAN, but you are free to use any name to your pool. So that is the second step. Step 3, insert addresses into the pool. Now, step 2, we created our pool, our container. Now step 3, we are going to put those addresses in the container, and those addresses are the ones that the clients will pick. So to do that, to insert in the addresses in the pool or in the container, we shall use the command network, and here we are using 192.168.1.96, and this is the subnet mask all clients will be using. Then step 4, insert the default gateway to be used by the DHCP client. Insert the default gateway to be used by the DHCP client using this command, default router. Then you put the gateway address. Normally the gateway address is the IP address we configure on our DHCP server. Step 5, you insert the DNS IP address into the pool. So that DNS IP, remember I told you, it is the ISP, Internet Service Provider, that gives you this address. So all the clients, if they are to access the internet, this is the DNS server address they will pick. So I'm assuming that this address is the one that the ISP provided to a company, and it's the one we are configuring on our router. So that is step 5. Now the last step, you set the lease time. What do we mean by lease time? Lease time is kind of, I can just give an example, like there are some countries whereby if you buy land which is on lease maybe of 5 years, that land is not yours. They have given it to you to use temporarily, and after that particular time or duration of 5 years, you have to renew your lease. So basically here, what happens when the server gives out an address to a client, it is leasing it out. The client will use it for some time, and after that time expires, the client will take back that IP address to the server, and the server will give a new address to the client. So it is very important at times to set the lease time, because if you don't set the lease time, what happens? By default, the lease time will be 24 hours. So that is too long. The client can hold an IP address for 24 hours without leasing it out. So that is why at times it is advisable you set the lease time. Like here, we use a command lease. We want a client to hold the IP address for 2 hours, 12 minutes, and 30 seconds. So this one is, it depends on the person configuring the DHCP server, the lease time he wants to use. So having configured the DHCP server, we have to know how to verify if things are working. So verification, we shall use these 3 commands. The first one is show IP DHCP pool. Now it is very important always to know what the use of these commands. When we say show IP DHCP pool, what we are trying to get is the details of the pool. In other words, they are trying to examine the pool details. Second command we shall use for verification is show IP DHCP binding. This one is used to examine established DHCP address assignments. The last command we shall use is show IP DHCP server statistics. This one is used to examine DHCP messages. We shall see that one later on when we go to the lab. So our part 1 is done. The next part we are going to be looking at is the DHCP lab, which is part 2.